the Pathfinder kick continues. So now we're getting into the GM core. So last week we went and did a flip through of the player's handbook or the player core rulebook or whatever you want to call it. So now we get into the actual rulebook for GMs. So you can kind of see the kind of cool nifty artwork there. So in the table of contents, we see like we're building on like the like chapter 8 of the player book, the player handbook. So running the game, building games, age lost omens, subsystems, and treasury troves. So like we'll see like going through this with each of the chapters and everything. So your nifty difty handy dandy introduction to kind of like, oh hey, this is what this is all about and everything. So the game master, how to use this book, like choosing your tools, stuff like that, and then get into actual chapter one, running the game. So now we get into like, okay, as the GM, you're having a welcome environment, objectable content, the baseline, and I could all like a bubble table right there, like on the sides, for like kind of like, oh hey, here's a quick idea. So it gets into like differences between published adventures, your own adventures. So I'm always big on, if you're a first time game master or whatever, published adventures are great because it, in a sense, it takes out a lot of the legwork for you and has everything pretty much already set up. So that way it's a lot easier for you to do. Now that does not necessarily you have to. It just makes things easier. So that's why it has like your own adventures. So it does talk about session 0, where you use like the first session just kind of like create characters, create the back story, and kind of like set things up for the actual campaign and everything. So that's always a good idea and everything. So now it gets into like a running the session, starting a session, stuff like that, spotlights, stakes, consequences. As you can see, like then improvisation. Yeah, because like a lot of times like you kind of improvise as your game master, because like players, you might want to have them go left or whatever, then all of a sudden they take a right turn out of nowhere, so you kind of have to improvise. So metagaming, yeah, that's a concept where like you as an individual might know something, but your actual character won't know something. Like for instance, you might here in the real world know about like quantum physics and quantum mechanics and advanced mathematics. Here in a campaign set in like a the Pathfinder, your character might not necessarily know something like that. So like yeah, if you're introducing like a ancient lost advanced civilization that knows this, like quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and advanced math, your character might not necessarily know something like that, but as a hero, as a real life person, you might know something like that. So that's the concept of like metagaming. So now we get into things like off session gaming, stuff like that, special considerations, as you can see, and we kind of go through like the whole like idea, like pretty much like, as you can see, concept of actually running the game. So now we get into like encounters. So like maybe you're encountering the bandits or something, or you have to delve into the dungeon in like run encounters and like that kind of sentence. That's what gets into that. So now you can see how over here it kind of breaks down like the flow of the book and everything, just like the last one. And we get into like exploration and like the different concepts of that. So you can see how this is a kind of a build upon like the player handbook or the player core book for like the Pathfinder. So now I use the terms interchangeably. I usually say player handbook because I'm a D&D veteran of like at least 30 years. So like I tend to say handbook, even though here in Pathfinder it's the player core. So as you can see, we're getting into like the actual rewards, like treasure. It gives you a nice nifty difty table to kind of make it easier to in a sense give people treasure, and of course the character wealth by level. Now we actually get into chapter 2, like building games. So now we get in the concept of like instead of just like your one shot, we're now building into like a campaign, so like an ongoing story and everything, and not just like encounters, like a single encounter with like the bandits or something. Maybe we get into the bandits, now we build into a campaign, and the bandits were hired by someone else, and now we start building ramping into like the campaign and everything. So this is what the chapter 2 is all about. Is like kind of like, in a sense, building campaigns, and like ramping in from chapter 1, ramping into like expanding it even more and everything. So here you can see like it also gets into like things like curses and stuff. So it builds on like different things that you can use as a game master. Curses like environmental environmental damages and stuff, like conditions that you can come across and everything while you're adventuring. Of course, hazards. Think of like traps and stuff like that in your stereotypical dungeon crawl. So the concept of like a hazards and stuff. So it gives just like spells. It gives you like the whole breakdown. As I got like half of it on screen and everything. And so we kind of like go through like a. So I'll kind of quickly get like go backwards since I only had half of it on. So you can see how we got through like I go through that quickly. And kind of go in this, and then it gives you the concept of building hazards. So like you can do like a your own unique pit, like a pit trap or like a spear trap or something like that. Now it gets into like the concept of building creatures. So think like your monster manual for like a D&D and everything. So like you can like give like a bunch of different tables and everything. So to kind of create monsters and stuff that are like akin to like whatever level you're at, whether it's level 1 or 20 or anything in between. So it gives you information on like how to be able to do that and scale it to where you're at in your campaign and everything. So as you can see, it definitely goes a whole lot more into depth for building the whole campaign set. So that's why, as a game master, it would actually be a good idea to get something like this. So now, as you can see, now after we've created the monsters and stuff, we can actually create items and stuff. So everybody loves getting magic items and everything. So that's where that comes in. So unless you're using the published stuff like the Glorian set and like here in Pathfinder, you can see we are getting into like actual building worlds and everything. So this is where like world building comes into mind. So like you might not necessarily like published stuff. So like as you can see here, as we get into chapter 3, you might not necessarily want to use this stuff and everything, because like, hey, look, I have so many different ideas that I want to use, that like I want to create my own stuff. That's what that chapter is. That last section of that chapter is. Now if you're like okay, well, I don't necessarily want to do all the legwork, here's like the whole campaign set and already done for me. So this chapter pretty much gets into like the whole world, and of course you can see here the actual like in a sense screening out to see the whole world. So like you see where this is actually set, kind of zoomed in. So here kind of like zoomed into like this area, and then you can see like as like it expands onto like the other parts of the world. So now there are as far as I know, there are different like source books out there, like especially for TNZ, that have come out and everything, so people can double check on that and everything. So now it actually breaks into like the different parts of like the chat, like the map here. It actually goes into like the different parts of the world, gives you information on each like in a sense section of where this campaign is going to take place, in like the, in a sense, the whole realms and like the background story. And of course now you get into like the different types of like humans and like different types of like races and stuff that you're going to be coming across. And of course, you know, it gets into depth on like the creatures, religion. Like I said, it gives you pretty much like the whole backstory and like everything you need. So it like takes out all the legwork. And as you can see here, we're getting into like factions. So like you can see here in Hell Knights, they're a key part in like the Age of Ashes, like adventure books or series that you can play. And so we're getting now more into depth. Like you can see with the factions, now we get into like the planes. So it gives you a good idea of like the outer planes and everything. Now you don't necessarily need to use the outer planes, because you could do a whole campaign on just the prime material plane, but it does give you this information in case you want to expand upon that, like as well. So it gives you like the different information on them as well. So like kind of like a quick overview. Then we actually get into like the subsystems, and so like kind of like breaking down things even further. Now, again, you don't necessarily have to use everything, but this is just something that can help build upon your campaign setting. As I seem to be stumbling over words this video, so here you can see like now we're getting into like whole idea of like chases, like you're chasing the villains or whatever, and like get into the idea of like an infiltration. Maybe you're trying to infiltrate the Thieves Guild or like the big bad evil guy's lair, something like that. That concept of like reputation. Think of like the infamous bounty hunter or the famous heroes or stuff like that. Gives you ideas on how to do, as you can see, duels. Concept of like leadership, exploration. So gives you an idea of like how to use like battle maps and stuff like that with the different hexes. Gives you information on like how to do like random encounters. Gives you like information, as you can see, on like vehicles. So as you can see, this whole chapter 4 is all about like the good old subsystems to kind of expand upon themselves. And here's everyone's favorite stuff: is treasure, treasure, treasure. The good old treasure trove. That's what the chapter 5 here is all about. Whether it's gold coins, equipment like armor and weapons, magic and stuff. As you can see, now we're getting to the armor and armaments. The whole idea of like runes that you can use, rune magic, scrolls, rings, staves, like wands, different types of like non-magical special armors, special like magical armor, shields and stuff like that. The kind of like the whole idea of like magic items and like concepts that are pretty much only limited by your imagination. So as you can see, you're now getting into like weapons, so different and of course you can't forget like potions and stuff like that. That's probably like the easiest like magic item you can do is potions. And so like potion magical items like that aren't necessarily like quite like a magic item of a matchstick or whatever. So the whole concept of magic can be like pretty much whatever you want it. Now we get into like materials that you would use for different types of like non-magical magical items, or like special items, like different types of metal that you can use to create armor and weapons, and different kind of concepts and everything for like as you can see there, for arrows, different kind of like ideas for potions. As you can see here, the stereotypical healing potion. And then we get into, as you can see, scrolls, talismans, like things like rings, necklaces, like crowns. Like I said, the concept of like magic items is like pretty much limitless on the different types of magic items you can do and everything. So anywhere from your typical magic items like a +1 longsword to like a +5 armor, to like your typical healing potions, to like your artifacts like in D&D, like the Hand and Eye of Vecna or whatever. But like you wouldn't necessarily see that like that in here in like Pathfinder, unless you decided, oh hey look, I want to pull it into here and everything. So now you can start to see that kind of like, in a sense, unique ideas for items and everything here, for like the overall like how you can get back to, like I just said, the ideas for magic items and stuff was like pretty much limitless. Now you can see here gems and art kind of getting into like a uncommon kind of like a rewards that you can get other than your typical like coins and stuff. Then we get into like the artifacts, like I mentioned, the Hand and Eye of Vecna for D&D. But you can see here like some of the different items for Pathfinder, and of course intelligent items. So like you end up getting like a sword that's intelligent and has its own personality. And we get into like relics, which is like a offshoot of artifacts and everything, and gives you like a whole description of some of them and ideas that you could use for your campaign as well. And as like I'm going to keep saying, pretty much treasures, magic items, and stuff like that is pretty much only limited by your imagination. So, in other words, it's limitless. And so, of course, we end the book like the player core book, or player handbook, as I like to call it, with a glossary and index where you can basically come across like a, oh hey, look, I want to learn about the Darklands, and I turn to like the page like 143 or 145. So it gives you a good idea of like the different like concepts and stuff that you find throughout this book. So this one is kind of like a shorter book than the player's handbook, but as you can see, they have like an advertisement back for the player core book. So kind of like, hey, vice versa. So like the player's core had like this little tidbit about this book, and this book has a little tidbit about the player core. So this one pretty much is for like the game master. As a player, you don't necessarily need it, and I would reiterate, just like a D&D, you pretty much only need the player core book or the player handbook to run a campaign and everything. So of course you obviously want to get some dice and everything to be able to roll and everything. But with this being a core rulebook, this is definitely well worth it for any of the game masters that are out there that are looking to, in a sense, play. So that way you have, as you can see through this whole book, a good like a basis for running campaigns, especially for a second edition Pathfinder, as you can see here.